Chapter 5 focuses on social reforms during the Progressive Era. Progressivism was a reform movement that looked at a number of reforms pertaining to anti monopoly, city beautification, civil service, government, and social reforms. It was the first sustained reform movement in the US that addressed urban issues. In the beginning of this era, many immigrants moved to northern and midwestern cities, and they made up a large portion of the US population and US industrial system. Unfortunately, they found themselves living in poor living conditions, including no public health regulations, food poisoning, sickness, fire hazards, high crime, etc. Social workers encouraged immigrants to adopt American cultural practices, but this caused conflict, and the workers did not recognize the immigrant families' values as beneficial alternatives. In the end of the 19th century, labor conditions were overall poor and dangerous, and employers were usually corrupt. They were insecure with few policies protecting people from disease, poverty, discrimination, crime, disability, and others. Social Darwinism was also popular during this time, which was a belief that certain people were more powerful in society because they were naturally better. This caused many corporate entrepreneurs to become corrupt and build economic empires, which allowed for the dangerous working conditions. There's also limited policy reforms for women and children. The mother's pension movement was only granted to a few women. There were juvenile courts, but they lacked innovative community programs and had understaffing, and the Children's Bureau did not provide frontal attack on poverty, malnutrition, and health. And for those with a mental illness, while social workers were with them while they were released from mental institutions, they did not get a lot of funding. There were some public health reforms developed during this time, including public health centers, public health inspectors, and licensed medical schools. Unfortunately, the progressives' agenda had a little impact or limited their impact because they had a number of reforms and they all received unequal attention. There was also the election between William Taft and Theodore Roosevelt, where Taft believed social reforms were not needed while Roosevelt did. Unfortunately, Roosevelt lost the election because it showed that social reform could not be successful unless they could obtain a power base. There was a very influential person during this time named Jane Addams, and she was a social worker that focused on settlement houses and fought for a number of groups, including children, women, immigrants, and African Americans. A number of groups experienced oppression, including women, African Americans, Asian immigrants, and Spanish-speaking persons. Women's reproductive and overall physical health was not looked at properly, and they were pushed to domestic duties and childbearing instead of entering professions. African Americans, Asians, and Spanish-speaking persons were all living improperly given low-paying jobs, had little health services, faced discrimination, and were denied education. Social work did develop during this time, and they had things such as casework and charities that provide assistance to people. And what we can learn is that we need empirical data in order to make social reforms, and that social workers need to be familiar with the regulatory side of the American welfare state, and that state and federal governments need to be given new policy roles.